morning, everyone. Happy Friday, and thank you for joining us. We'll give it about one more minute before we get started as people are starting to log in. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll get started. And Kevin, I just made you the presenter.
All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. The UNLV Alumni Association is very proud to acknowledge, honor, and celebrate Black History Month through today's engaging program with Dr. Kevin Wright. As a foundational part of our mission, the association remains committed to informing and engaging our nearly 130,000 alumni through virtual events, such as our Rebel Recharge Lunch and Learn series and other important events and programs throughout the year. My name is Stacy Purcell, and I am a proud 1990 hospitality graduate and president of the UNLV Alumni Association. It's my honor to personally welcome each of you here today. I would also like to give special recognition and welcome to Blake Douglas, our interim associate vice president for alumni engagement and interim executive director for the UNLV Alumni Association. A very special thank you to Renee Rivera-Gelfi, our coordinator for program and events, and for producing today's virtual lecture. Our next virtual Rebel Recharge is scheduled for Friday, March 19th. The topic is Your Inner Life, How to Learn About It, and Why It Matters, presented by Dr. Chris Heavey, Executive Vice President and Provost at UNLV. We have a robust schedule of events this spring. I encourage you to visit our website, engage.unlv/events, for more information on all of our upcoming events. Our goal is to continue to grow our programs and events and create fun, educational, and engaging opportunities for our alumni, faculty, staff, students, and community members. And one of the best ways we can achieve that goal is with your help. I encourage you to share your excitement about the events you attend by inviting others to join you and by posting on your social media channels and tagging at UNLV alumni. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's program, Dr. Kevin Wright. Dr. Wright currently serves as the inaugural Assistant Director for the Student Diversity in the Office of Student Diversity and Social Justice at UNLV. Kevin is responsible for overseeing departmental initiatives that can create positive institutional and systemic change while centering and empowering those who hold historically marginalized identities. Kevin has previously worked in residence life, student activities, TRIO programs, student affairs administration, and student leadership and service learning. Kevin earned a bachelor's in business communications with a minor in sociology from Northern Arizona University and a master's in student affairs administration from Lewis and Clark College, and a doctorate of education in organizational leadership from North Central University. We're thrilled to have Dr. Kevin Wright with us today to share his research and perspectives for Give and Take, relationship building between Black Alumnx and historically white institutions. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kevin Wright.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for providing this space for me in order to share bits and parts of my research as it relates to Alumnx engagement and rebuilding and reframing those relationships that we have between Alumnx of color and historically white institutions. And for the sake of today's presentation, we're just going to focus on the Black African American population, or specifically the African diaspora. So before we get started, something that is a common practice because of the work that I do in the Office of Student Diversity and Social Justice is that before we get into the main points of today's presentation, we at first want to acknowledge, the land that we are navigating on. And since I work at UNLV, I am at least going to acknowledge the land in terms of like where I work at UNLV and the land that we are navigating and operating on. So I acknowledge that I am on the ancestral lands of the Nuruvi Southern Paiute people. I acknowledge the indigenous people of the lands where Las Vegas is located and recognize that these have always been places of teaching and learning. I wish to pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge the important role that Nuruvi Southern Paiute people continue to play within the Las Vegas community. This acknowledgement in the centering of Native peoples is a start as we move forward for many years to come. So before we get into, again, the main points of this presentation, some people may be wondering why the word Alumnx. I've been asked this question many, many times, and I'm always faced with the argument, oh, Kevin, Alumnx is not a word, that word is made up. Honestly, all words are made up, so that's an irrelevant argument, first of all. Secondly, here's the breakdown on this slide in terms of why I use the word Alumnx. So when we think of the different iterations of alum or alumni or alumnus, right? Alumnus or alumnus refers to specifically men or male graduates, right? Alumni is the more common word that we use because that's supposed to refer to both men and women, or specifically male and female. And then you have the other words that are specific to women or female graduates, right? And then alum is kind of more of an informal word, but we still use it in various contexts when engaging with people that are graduates of an institution. Alumnx is essentially a more inclusive term that is used more often today because of the fact that it at least includes people that identify as gender non-binary or transgender, or don't identify within the gender binary specifically, because still to this day, alumni, even though it's supposed to be an inclusive term, it still only acknowledges people within the gender binary and does exclude those that don't identify within the gender binary. So I am aware of the fact that this is generational, this is systemic, this is infrastructural, this is institutional, right? And even then, different words have different meanings. So at least for the sake of the populations that I've worked with and the students that I've advocated for, and then the Alumnx that I've also worked alongside in terms of doing this advocacy work, many of them have been more receptive to the word Alumnx because of the fact that it's more inclusive. But who knows? The word may change again because language is always shifting and it ebbs and flows. But I just wanted to make sure that we all had a proper understanding of why I use this word Alumnx. So the problem statement. So again, much of the main points from this presentation stem from research that I conducted during my doctoral studies when I defended my dissertation last November in 2020. So in regards to my research topic, the topic itself was cultivating a culture of philanthropy among alumnus of color who previously attended historically white institutions. So the problem statement, essentially what led me to this research topic, was just trying to figure out why I even wanted to research this, what the actual problem was. And for me, the problem was that there is a lack of literature, or a dearth of literature, if you will, that talks about philanthropic support as it relates to the transactions or the actions that are made between alumnus of color and the relationship that they have with their alma mater, especially if their alma mater or their previous institution is a historically white institution. So the purpose of my research essentially was to further differentiate the differences and the nuances between different diasporic communities. So again, some of the literature does talk about alumni, or in this case, alumnus of color. There is some literature that does talk about Black and African American Alumnx. And even then, much of the literature still paints Alumnx of color as a monolith. So therefore, if you are a person of color that graduated from a college, you all experience the same thing, you all think the same way, you all do the same thing, you all had the same college experience, right? When that's obviously not true. So the purpose of my research was to further differentiate the diaspora communities and try to bring about more information and insight that talked about, so what exactly was this diaspora community experiencing that differ from the other communities of color? For the sake of my research, I referenced 3 theoretical frameworks. So I referenced social constructivist theory, social exchange theory, and impact philanthropy theory. So social constructivist theory essentially defines it creates an opportunity for us to figure out how we make meaning of what we experience. So in my research, I asked very specific and strategic questions to further learn about how did a person, specifically an Alumnx of color, make meaning out of their experiences from when they were an undergraduate student. Social exchange theory is about understanding the motivations of why we give and what we expect in return. So in regards to alumni engagement or Alumnx engagement and giving back to their alma mater, it's one of those things where I utilize this theory because it's been referenced highly and extensively in previous literature, but then it also talks about, okay, we know why we want to give, but what are we truly expecting in return, if anything at all. And that's where some of the holes are in the literature, because it doesn't properly articulate what do people of color or Alumnx of color expect in return for when they do give, and then also what contributes to their understanding specifically in order for them to want to give. And then impact philanthropy theory talks about essentially the act of wanting to make a lasting positive change. So when you think about these institutions that ask their Alumnx to give back, whether it's through philanthropy, monetary donations, their time, their mentorship, their volunteerism, at the end of the day, we need to be better at articulating what kind of impact that is truly making on the experience of current students, and also how this benefits the Alumnx themselves, all while advancing the mission, vision, and values of the institution itself. So these frameworks were the basis of my research and what led me to get the insight that I was in from the research study participants. The research questions, I only had 2 questions that I wanted to answer within the confines of my research study. And that was, how do historically white institutions, or HWIs, cultivate a culture of philanthropy among Alumnx of color? And the second question was, how can historically white institutions improve their engagement with Alumnx of color to foster sustainable relationships? So for the sake of this presentation, again, I'm only focusing on the African diaspora because that was what was requested of me. But just know that my research talks about 4 major diaspora communities. So Asian Pacific Islander and Middle Eastern, otherwise known as APIME at UNLV, Black, African American, Native American, Indigenous, and Latinx. But at least just for the sake of this presentation, we're going to focus on one diaspora community over the rest. So now getting to the actual main points of this presentation. So in order to answer question 1, 3 themes came up throughout my surveys as well as my interviews when I was conducting my research study. And they're on the screen. Cultural competency, acknowledgement of practices rooted in white supremacy, and equitable representation. So starting with cultural competency, essentially many of the research participants stated or shared that anytime that they have engaged with people that represent their alma mater and have asked to give back or have called to check in on them or have even called to provide updates about what their alma mater institution is doing currently as it relates to bettering the student experience, many of the research participants felt that it was very vague. It was very fake, quite frankly. It was very cookie cutter. It felt scripted. It didn't feel genuine. It was one of those things where they essentially just grabbed a person that worked in the office who had a packet in front of them and they said, oh, hello, Mr. or Miss or person, it doesn't matter, right? And they were just reading off of some type of script that was given to them by their director or their direct supervisor. So cultural competency was one of the resultant themes of my research, because of the fact that many of the research participants felt like that no one was actually taking the time to, one, understand them, and two, effectively communicate with them. So therefore, when navigating conversations or navigating any type of social interaction with people with historically marginalized identities, talking to them or treating them the same way is not always effective. So the same way that you would talk to, say for instance, a person who is gender non-binary and they identify as Latinx and they're a first gen, the way that you would talk to them is different than how you would talk to a cisgender heterosexual Black man who was also a first gen. It's one of those things where there's different cultural customs, there's different practices, there's different ways of effectively communicating and engaging with people, because of the fact that 9 times out of 10, even when you are trying to be a little bit more personal and you're trying to provide that customized experience, sometimes what gets communicated is a web of macro and microaggressions, because you are now thinking like, oh, hey, you identify within this particular community, and therefore you must have had this same experience as anybody else that identifies in the exact same way. So that's why cultural competency is very important, because we have to be mindful that yes, we are engaging with human beings, and we also have to be mindful of the intersectional identities that exist within these individuals, especially alumni of color, because of the fact that if you approach folks with a cookie cutter practice or with just a vague and disingenuous approach, you're going to further contribute to that distrust that they probably already have, because they didn't probably have the best experience when attending your institution as a student, and therefore that disconnection is just being strong, is becoming stronger and stronger. The second point, acknowledgement of practices rooted in white supremacy. So think about your institution. Think about your alma mater for the Alumnx folks in the audience. Think about if your institution has had multiple racially biased incidents. Think about if your institution has had multiple quote unquote taboo conversations or critical conversations about the mascot. Think about if your institution has had a lot of protests. Think about if your institution has some really questionable policies that you feel kind of low-key target certain student populations. All of these things are practices and examples of practices that can further uphold white supremacy. So therefore, it is very crucial for not only university advancement practitioners to acknowledge this, but for an entire institution itself to acknowledge and to also bring about tangible change, systemic, organizational, institutional, infrastructural change in order for these practices to no longer be upheld within the institution, and to also no longer uphold practices rooted in white supremacy. And then with the last point, equitable representation, many institutions, especially at historically white institutions, their entire university advancement department is usually one gender, one race. One gender or one race, or is predominantly comprised of individuals with dominant identities. And therefore, if you work at an institution that even does have a strong population of a specific diaspora community, it's very crucial for you to see how can we have equitable representation within our department in order to match that, but then to also make sure that these folks come in with a specific skill set and have work ethic to a specific caliber that isn't just for the sake of meeting a quota, but is also for the sake of actually doing work that is effective as regards to advancing the department itself, meeting the expectations for advancing the mission and vision and values of the institution, and also not further contributing harm to one, current students, and to current alumni. So that was the first question, right? And the second question, my research talks about all 4 diaspora communities, but for the sake of this presentation, we're just focusing on the African diaspora. So with the second question, how can historically white institutions improve their engagement with alumni of color to foster sustainable relationships, specifically as it relates to the African diaspora? Any research participants that were involved in my research study that identify as Black, African-American, from the Caribbean, et cetera, has some type of lineage to Black identity or African ancestry. These are the 4 themes that popped up: anti-Blackness, historical recognition, monolithic Blackness, and unacknowledged emotional labor. So while I'm going through these 4 points, I also want you all to process 2 quotes that I received permission to share with you all openly that stems from direct insight and perspective and raw narratives from two of the research participants of my study. And for the folks that may need it to be read out loud, I will read those. Just need to take a sip of water real quick. So one of the research participants, whose name is Bruce, they said, we need to tell the real enshrined history of the university. That way we're not just sugarcoating what has happened. We can fully say with our full chest that we made some strides, and yes, we didn't do our best, but going forward, we have learned and we will always embrace and include all students of color going forward. Elena, another research participant, said, listening sessions are how institutions pretend that they are doing the work because they listen, they make you bare your soul. And you know, there's a lot of higher negative emotions there. And then what has been done after that listening session, so they hire a chief diversity officer, which is one of the least effective positions in higher education because you don't allow people to do the work that needs to get done. So as I read those quotes out loud to you all, think about what's coming up for you and think about if that resonated with you in terms of how you feel about your alma mater or any other institution, whether you're an Alumnx or a university advancement practitioner. So going back to the 4 points, anti-Blackness. So when it comes to specifically Black students, many times, or even Black Alumnx, right? Many times it's very common for them to have an experience where they were assumed to be an athlete. They were assumed to be on a special scholarship. They were assumed to be a recruit to meet the quota because of affirmative action. They were assumed to be Greek. They were assumed, and they were never probably acknowledged for just being a smart, intellectual, Black, educated person, right? And that's very common in regards to the micro and macroaggressions that are experienced by folks within the African diaspora. So therefore, or even more so, all of that on top of what happens systemically, where it's actually been documented that Black students are enrolled in remedial courses more oftentimes than not than their non-Black counterparts, and more so this is done without consultation with an academic advisor. So therefore, the assumptions are implicit and explicit, where it's like, we assume that you're on special scholarship. We assume that you're an athlete. We assume that you are here because you're here to fill a diversity course. So therefore, we assume that you need to take the remedial courses because you're just not there. But we will do whatever we can to make you comfortable as you navigate your college career. So therefore, when you think about these things that are happening on a daily basis for many students within the African diaspora, that further perpetuates forms of anti-Blackness. And anti-Blackness is pervasive. Anti-Blackness is protected by certain policies within institutions. Anti-Blackness is upheld by faculty and staff members, some of which who are Black themselves, because they subscribe to systems of whiteness and white supremacy. So therefore, it's very crucial for us to disrupt these toxic and vicious cycles that further uphold and further perpetuate anti-Blackness as relates to the Black student experience. So when a Black student is trying to come to college and is trying to get their education and trying to get that degree, and all of these things are happening to them both inside and outside the classroom, and then they finally graduate and they become an Alumnx, and then you have the audacity to ask them for money, like, it's one of those things where just like, no, for many research participants, they said that the moment they got to college, it was made abundantly clear that this was nothing more than a transactional relationship. I pay my tuition, you give me my education, you give me my degree, we're done. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things where I know that that's not the intention of many institutions, and yet that is what exactly happened for many Black identified students, where it simply was just nothing more than like, I give you money, you give me a degree, we go our separate ways. So that distrust, that disconnection starts from the moment they walk onto campus, and that's 4 years prior to when they actually walk across the stage and shake the president's hand to get their diploma. So it's one of those things where university advancement, as well as institutions, are already putting themselves in a situation where they're setting themselves up for failure, because from the moment a Black student enters and steps foot onto their campus, they're already perpetuating this idea that this is simply a transactional relationship and nothing more and nothing less. The next point, historical recognition. I would encourage anyone to truly research the history of higher education. Because of the fact that not many people know that it has been documented that higher education is a system that was not initially designed to advance people with historically marginalized identities. Colleges were initially built to advance cisgender heterosexual Christian white men to become clergy. And even when they let women into college, they were trained on how to be better wives. Okay, they weren't even learning actual curriculum, right? It's one of those, and then when they let Black folks in and then other people of color in, it was one of those things where it was because policies were shifting. Organizations were shifting, cultures were shifting, et cetera, et cetera. And then plus there's a lot of advocacy and a lot of protesting that happened in order to advance more folks with historically marginalized identities within the system of higher education. I would also encourage people to even research the history of their alma mater and ask yourself, who even built your alma mater? Who built your institution? A lot of people don't take the time to even address that history, where it's just like some institutions within the United States were built by formerly enslaved people. Okay, there are people, and so to think about that, think about how there are potentially folks within the African diaspora that are attending institutions as current students, knowing that chances are somebody from their lineage helped build that institution that they are now navigating, and yet they're experiencing micro and macroaggressions because of their racialized identity. And again, all of that is not being recognized. All of that is not being acknowledged in most places. And then these same institutions that uphold these practices and further perpetuate this violence, this anti-Black violence onto Black students, still have the audacity to ask, hey, would you like to give money? Hey, would you like to come to this event? Hey, would you like to sit on this board? And it's just like, we need to be more mindful of how we truly are acknowledging everything that has happened that has impacted folks within the African diaspora as it relates to not only society, but even furthermore within the system of higher education. Which brings me to the next point, monolithic Blackness. So again, I said earlier that the literature paints Alumnx of color as a monolith. So therefore, if one Alumnx of color went through something, then all Alumnx of color went through something. In the literature and also in the research that I conducted with research participants, that is further magnified for those within the African diaspora, because many of them felt that essentially they were met with another assumption where it's just like, hey, you're a Black Alumnx. So then therefore, you had the exact same experience as this Black Alumnx that went to the same institution. And it even stems from those scripts that are being read. It stems from those inorganic conversations that are being had with Black Alumnx. And it's because of the fact that we are not taking the time to truly acknowledge the intersectional identities as well as the intersectional experiences that a person may have had while navigating college within a Black body. Because for instance, there are Black veterans, there are Black first-gen students, there are Black queer and trans students, there are Black Black students who are caregivers, caretakers, there are Black students who are sex workers, there are Black students who are parents, there are Black students who have a mixture of all of those different identities, all culminated into one single individual, right? And even then, we need to take time to figure out, so in light of the intersectional identities that this person has, and in light of the intersectional systems in place that either advance or further disenfranchise this person, we need to be mindful, what does that mean in terms of actually building and potentially reframing the relationship that we have with this person? And again, we need to do that for all of our Alumnx. And even then, it's just that a lot of the times that gets neglected when working with Alumnx of color, because policy, literature, scholarship, and the very praxis of certain university advancement offices always operate under the guise that Alumnx of color is one community and one demographic, and there is no need to further dissect into the inner intricacies of the subcommunities that fall under that umbrella term. So even our language perpetuates violence and erasure towards historically marginalized identities of people that previously attended this institution. And again, we have the audacity to still ask them for money and to ask them to sit on this board, or then to ask them to sit on this task force, and not even realizing how much labor came from what they already did when they were a student, which brings me to the last point, unacknowledged emotional labor. So again, think about the strides for change or difference that your institution has made, right? If your institution has hired a chief diversity officer, if your institution has created a task force, if your institution has created a scholarship, right? If your institution has hired more faculty and staff that look like that particular demographic, in this case, more faculty and staff that look Black, right? Okay, is that a reactionary decision or was that a proactive decision? Most of the time it's reactionary, right? And that reaction came from what? Usually protests, usually demands, right? Usually town halls, usually listening sessions as what's mentioned on the screen, right? And even then, where did that labor come from? The students. So again, we need to be mindful of the fact that many institutions haven't even acknowledged the emotional unpaid labor and the physical unpaid labor and the social unpaid labor that has stemmed from Black students that have resorted to many institutional and systemic changes at their alma mater. And the thing is that many students within the African diaspora, especially the ones that were research participants, they all said that, Kevin, I just hope that everything that I gave to that institution for the 4 years or the 4+ years that I was there was not in vain. Because here's the thing, many Black students have had this experience where they put their heart and soul into an institution for the time that they are there. And the moment they graduate, everything gets erased, everything gets changed, or everything goes back to the way it was before they got there and tried to change everything for the better. So therefore, when you go back to this Black Alumnx and you ask like, hey, what are you willing to give to further instill your legacy as a Black Alumnx of this institution? Okay, newsflash, they did give back. They gave back while attending as a student. They gave so much back with interest that they were hoping that it was appreciated. And yet, when institutions then change what was already done, or they actually neglect the labor or the actions that are taken by students through advocacy and protesting, that's a slap in the face to them. So therefore, you can't be surprised when you go to Black Alumnx, knowing that they don't trust you, they don't mess with you, they don't associate themselves with you. And if they do, they probably only associate themselves with certain entities of the campus community. Because many research participants said, Kevin, I will never give back to my institution. But if anyone ever asked me to give back to an identity center or the Multicultural Student Center or a TRIO program or, just anything of those types of functional areas, they would give back in a heartbeat. And that's the thing. Alumnx of color will tell you explicitly who supported them and who didn't support them. And that's the thing. Do we even ask those questions in order to actually figure out, so how much trauma and how much baggage potentially are you holding that stems from your own institution where you got your education? Is your education a part of your identity? Are you even proud that you went to this college? You know what I mean? And if so, are you proud in general? Are you proud holistically? Or are you specifically proud of the support that you got from the Women's Center, from the Multicultural Student Center, from the First Gen Center, from the TRIO program initiative, et cetera, et cetera. And it's one of those things where like that stuff matters, that context matters, which is why we need to be more mindful of how we perpetuate working in silos within higher education, because of the fact that that impacts the student experience as well as the Alumnx experience and further creates more of that distrust and that disconnection. So in regards of everything that I just mentioned, I have a few recommendations for folks that are specifically in higher ed, but then also for folks that work in other industries, but are but they do identify as Black Alumnx or just Alumnx in general, especially Alumnx of color. So at least for the recommendations for higher education, assess and evaluate your current infrastructures. Look at your policies. Look at your organizational structure. Look at your reporting lines. Look at how you conduct staff meetings. Look at how you train your staff members to engage with people. Look at what expectations are set for you by institutional leadership. Now think about how many of those things potentially are problematic or anti-Black, quite frankly, or they actually don't do an effective job of advancing the mission of the institution because of the fact that they're problematic towards individuals in communities that are historically marginalized. Change those systems, change those infrastructures. Be more mindful of what it actually means to cultivate a culture of philanthropy, because part of cultivating that culture is the relationship that is needed. If you already have a broken relationship, it's going to take time for you to mend and repair that harm, because of the fact that, again, if all you're doing is just checking in on folks and calling folks and cold calling them and sending them letters in the mail that they don't read, right? You can't be surprised if there's low engagement or low involvement, because of the fact that everyone's experience is different. So some Black Alumnx may be connected to their alma mater because whatever happened for them, for their experience, was good, and it was good enough for them to stay connected. But for others, it was the complete opposite. So now we got to figure out, how do we retain that Black Alumnx who's already involved, but then also try to figure out how can we potentially reclaim our relationship with that Black Alumnx who is not connected to our community and feels further disconnected and does not trust us. What harm needs to be healed and repaired in order for us to further sustain those relationships? And then furthermore, what can we do with our current students so that way they have a more positive outlook and perception to have a willingness to give back for when they graduate and become Alumnx? Produce more transparency. Many times when I have given back to my alma maters specifically, and even from the narratives from the Black research participants of my study, many of them felt blindsided because they didn't have full context of what giving back meant. So for example, one of the research participants shared an experience where they were asked to give back to a general scholarship fund that was specifically for people of color. Right? They gave back, they gave some money to that scholarship fund, and then they realized that there was apparently multiple administrative processing fees that impacted their gift. And then they were concerned that only a third of the money that they gave actually went to the pot, went to the scholarship fund that was for communities of color. So therefore, they felt cheated and they felt betrayed by their institution because they didn't know that there was different administrative processes in order that incur a fee to a gift before it actually hits who is supposed to benefit. So therefore, provide more transparency. Talk about the pipelines of where the money goes. Show people how the money actually benefits folks. Show the impact of every single cent and every single dollar. Don't hide information about the administrative fees, because of the fact that again, by not knowing that and knowing that that research participant gave money and they felt betrayed, they haven't given back since, because now that just further contributed to harm, that further contributed to distrust, that further contributed to disconnection, because now it's just like, one, who is my money going towards? And two, how much of it are they truly going to see if we have all of these administrative processes that pick and choose money from that gift, right? So be more mindful of like what transparency looks like within your department. Create sustainable systems of customized giving. So again, these general scholarship funds are fun, they're cute, it's nice, whatever. And at the same time, much of my research shows that people want to have full understanding of the kind of impact that they can make, hence impact philanthropy theory. So therefore, we need to be more mindful of like how we can create customized opportunities for Alumnx of color, especially Black Alumnx, where they actually know where their money's going, who their money is benefiting, and then also how much of that money is actually going to benefit them versus just take care of administrative processes within the office that has to handle the money that you just gave to the institution. You know what I mean? And then last but not least, diversify the representation of university advancement practitioners. This has been extensively talked about and covered in the literature for years. The only thing that I would add to it based on my research is that we need to diversify not only the representation of university advancement practitioners, but we also need to diversify the training and the approach that those people receive when they are called upon to work within university advancement. So therefore, in regards to this particular community, if you hire someone that is Black or African American to work in your university advancement office, okay, that's cute. You have Black representation, but do you have someone who is not only representing, you know, the Black community, but are they actually representing ways to approach and address the needs of the Black community? Because again, it comes back to this saying that's prominently known in the Black community. Not all kinfolk is kinfolk, right? So therefore, chances are you may hire someone who identifies as Black or African American, but isn't pro-Black or does not care about the needs and concerns of the Black community, or may not know how to effectively engage with Black Alumnx. So therefore, we have to be mindful that just because they fit the description, which is very problematic way of thinking, and yet many people maintain that way of thinking, it does not mean that their approach to the identities that they hold are meant to advance the identities of the communities of the communities that they represent. So therefore, we need to diversify the representation and also the praxis of what we train university advancement practitioners to do within the specific functional area as it relates to advancing the mission of the institution itself. And now recommendations for folks that are alumnx. So if I have any Black alumnx out there that are watching, think about this and just know that this is meant to be universal accountability. And these are some things that we can do. And chances are you're probably not even perpetuating problematic behavior as a Black alumnx. But if you know anybody that is, or maybe if you are doing this yourself, think about how you can disrupt some of these problematic behaviors so that way we can better the experience for not only Black alumnx, but also current Black students that are attending institutions like this. So keep in mind that giving back is not just done through money. Many institutions have a different variation of how they even introduce this concept to their alumnx. And it's very important to be mindful of the fact that giving back can be through money, it can be through fundraising, it can be through service and volunteering, it can be through sitting on a board, it can be through being the chair of an alumnx association, right? And even then, there's so much more to it than that. There's so many opportunities to give back. It just depends on, one, the impact that you want to make, and also depends on what opportunities already exist at the institution and what opportunities could be created in the future that aren't already being considered. Hold your alma mater accountable. So if you know that as a Black alumnus, you didn't have the best experience at your alma mater institution, check in. I mean, yes, I understand that you probably are completely disconnected from them. You probably don't even talk to them. They're just a thought of the past, right? And even then, there are students at that institution now that look like you, that are probably going through what you went through and don't deserve it, just like you didn't deserve it. So therefore, be mindful of whether or not your institution is still upholding problematic practices that further harm people that look like you and stem from your community. Hold your alma mater accountable. In regards to the next point, disrupting systems. So again, if you know that your institution is still perpetuating certain practices or systems in place that harm specifically Black identified students, okay, call them out on that. Reach out to folks, reach out to faculty and staff to see what's been done. Reach out to university advancement, reach out to the president's office, it doesn't matter, but you need to know what is going on, and you have every right to just want what is best for students that look like you, because of the fact that we do not need, nor do we deserve to continue perpetuating this vicious cycle of anti-Black violence every 4 to 6 years. For every new cohort of students that comes through a college, and then they walk out with not only a degree, but they also walk out with potentially student loan debt, and then also a bag full of trauma. So it's one of those things where it's very crucial for us to not just navigate these mindsets where it's just like, oh, well, I went through and I'm okay-ish. So then therefore what they're going through, they'll be fine. It builds character, blah, blah, blah. Which brings me to the next point, erasing the approach and the narrative of comparison bias. So just because you survived it doesn't mean somebody's gonna survive it just like you did, okay? There are Black students that aren't being retained. There are Black students that aren't making it to graduation. As a Black alumnus, you have an opportunity to see what could potentially be done to get that Black student that is potentially at risk or may not being served properly or supported properly in order to get them to graduation, in order for them to be an equal of yours, because you both will now be Black alumnus. So therefore, whatever you went through, that you got through it, I applaud you, I commend you, I am grateful for you. And at the same time, not everyone thinks and operates like you, because that further perpetuates to them and to us that we all think and operate the same. So therefore, we all know how to survive the same. That is not true. So therefore, think about what you can do for those that are currently going through the same struggles that you went through however many years ago when you were once a student. and recognize your influence. If you have a relationship, or if you don't have a relationship with your alma mater, think about why that is and how much of it is stemming from your own experiences that were perpetuating harm to you because of these systems and the practices that were put in place that did not further advance you, but they just further neglected you and disenfranchised you. So think about what you could do individually, but then also collectively with other Black Alumnx to create actual change that could be in conjunction with the institution to better the experience for Black students so they can make it to graduation and not further experience other pieces of perpetuated harm and trauma. And the last point, again, when you do get involved, if you do get involved, when you are trying to make certain changes, make sure that is for the basis of contributing to organizational, systemic, institutional, infrastructural change. So therefore, be mindful of what is necessary to make your alma mater a more inclusive and equitable and welcoming space for people that look like you. In this case, what can your institution do to be more of a safe space, embrace space, and a learning conducive space for Black students? And as I hit the tail end of my presentation, so it's very interesting just to remind folks of things as we consider what our role is in this work. So keep in mind, again, higher education was not initially designed to advance Black people. That is historical fact. However, in the year 2021, many institutions still perpetuate a lot of policies, a lot of systems, and a lot of practices that are rooted in anti-Blackness. Anti-Blackness is pervasive. Anti-Blackness is everywhere. Anti-Blackness, as a reminder, is protected by policy in some cases at many institutions. So therefore, if you already know that there are certain policies that perpetuate harm to Black folks, fight to change them. And again, as a reminder, not all skin folk is kin folk. So just because you see Black representation, it doesn't mean that they have the intention of advocating for Black students. It doesn't mean that they have the intention of advancing the African diaspora. So therefore, I'm not saying, you can't trust folks within your own community. And at the same time, you can't trust certain folks in your community because they are not here to help. They are simply here to subscribe to forms of whiteness and to further get ahead on their own individual merit, and they don't care about the community. So therefore, make sure that you are doing this work alongside people that are trying to advance the collective community and not just doing it for personal individual gain. And then also think about how this translates to the workforce. So when a Black student graduates from their institution, and then they transition into the workforce, are they now going to enter another system under a different name that's going to perpetuate that same harm? So think about your workplace. Is your workplace a conducive environment for Black individuals? Does your company, does your organization have a positive relationship with Black employees? Can they effectively recruit and retain them? If not, okay, so now you're thinking about some more things, right? So now we have multiple systems that we need to change in order to better the experience of Black individuals. And it all starts with asking those questions, holding people accountable, and actually creating things that lead to actual change. Yes, it's good to have critical conversations. And at the same time, it's even more important to actually have these conversations lead to action and lead to sustainable change that makes things better in an equitable and inclusive manner. And these are some resources that I recommend for folks to actually read because of the fact that not only do they help folks that work in university advancement, they help most organizations and institutions that exist in our society. And then also many of these resources can actually help folks be more culturally competent, have a more trauma-informed outlook and approach to things, and trauma-responsive outlook and approach to things, and then also being more mindful of how inclusion and equity are very crucial to developing stronger relationships as it relates to creating and cultivating that culture of philanthropy. And therefore, it always starts with just the basics. So it's very common for higher education administrators to use diversity, equity, and inclusion synonymously, when in fact they are three different concepts. So therefore, we need to make sure that we're on the same page of finding that common ground, that common understanding, and radicalizing ourselves and having or experiencing that paradigm shift in order to be better and to be more inclusive and to actually create change that is beneficial to all, right? And is advancing the historically marginalized. And these are my references, just a few references that I mentioned all throughout the presentation. But if anyone would like to review all of my references for my dissertation, it's in the process of getting published right now as we speak. And if people contact me, I would be more than welcome to share that with them if they are available. But that was my presentation. I appreciate everyone for providing this space for me and listening and, you know, challenging your own assumptions about this. And I am always open for feedback and critiques because I know that this research study was not perfect, but nonetheless, I hope that the information from this presentation helps you understand what your role could be as we create better relationships between historically white institutions and, in this case, Black Alumnx, but then also better the overall student experience for Black students. So thank you.
Thank you for that thought-provoking conversation, your presentation. I can't tell you, I'm a big fan. And Dr. Wright, I just want to say right now, a lot of advocacy is happening within UNLV Alumni Association. There's a lot of work out there. So this is, the time couldn't be any better. Thank you so much. And I have a couple of questions for you real quickly.
And there's a couple of questions in the chat as well. So.
Oh, good. Okay, why don't you do the chat first, Renee? Go ahead.
Are you sure? Okay. All right. So first question is, based on your research, did any of the HWI have a Black president or Black leadership in decision-making roles? If so, did you notice different findings?
Great question. So specifically in regards to the Black research participants that participated in my study, only one of them attended an institution that had a Black president at the time that they were a student. And the findings weren't that different from other research participants who attended institutions that didn't have a Black president. The research participant, what I can say out of respect for their anonymity, is that they felt as if that institution hired a Black president for the sake of just trying to show face and show that they had a strong commitment to diversity, because that, at the time, that institution, their entire cabinet, white. And then the president, their former president left, and then they hired a Black president. So then it was one Black person who was the president, but the entire cabinet was still white, and even then predominantly men, right? So this research participant felt like the president at that time was simply hired just to be there as the face of the institution, but not actually bring about institutional change, because they felt that that person was, even though that person was Black, they felt that that person was very complacent and not an effective leader. And I don't believe that president is still there.
Right. Next question. Is UNLV taking action with any of the recommendations, higher ed, that you shared? And how does the Black Alumnx get involved with your recommendations at UNLV?
That is a very good question. And I know that there was, and you know, please correct me on the verbiage because I want to be respectful of the labor that went into this initiative. I believe there is now a Black Alumni Association or Black Alumni Chapter, right, at UNLV?
Mm-hmm.
Right, Renee?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, so I know that that has started, and the chair or director or president, again, correct me on the verbiage, right? But the leader, Joytea Pollard, has already been in contact with me. We've been playing schedule tag, mainly from my end. So Joytea, if you're in the audience, I apologize. But we do plan to have a conversation in the future to talk about what actually are the goals of the Black Alumni Association as it relates to UNLV, and then figuring out what does that look like. Because one of the things that I was very excited about was when Joytea reached out to me, the first thing I thought of was like, I definitely would like to share my research with her. So that way, one, I can better understand what their goals are for the Black Alumni Association, what the members' mission, vision of where they want this association to go, and then figure out how we can actually marry the two as it relates to bettering the student experience for Black identified students at UNLV, and then also sustaining this new initiative, because it's great that it started, and at the same time, just like, so now what needs to happen in order to sustain the Black Alumni Association? Because something that I noticed, from the research participants in my study is that many of them did mention, all but one mentioned that they had a Black Alumni Association equivalent initiative at their institution. And even then it would be active for like a year or two, go silent, reactivate like 3 years later, be active for like a year, go silent. So it's one of those things where like, I don't want that to happen to the association at UNLV. And I do not believe that its leadership, Joytea Pollard, would ever let that happen, because I know a lot of labor went into advocating for that. So everything is still TBD, quite frankly, and that's only because I haven't been engaged or involved in certain conversations that I know are happening as it relates to the grounding of the Black Alumni Chapter, as well as what role they will have with engaging with current Black students.
Thank you. And yes, the next question is, how do they get more information about becoming involved? And so Blake or Stacy, do you have a little bit more information about the process of people getting involved in that club?
Sure, yeah. I mean, the process of getting involved is basically reaching out to either Frankie or Joytea, and just getting active. So it's open to anyone and everyone that participate and be involved with them. So they're building their membership now, working on some events and programs to help get exposure. They have an active Facebook page right now, and other avenues through the main alumni website. So.
And that was my question, was they're our newest affinity group. It's an exciting time, and right now the time is so amazing, because the timing couldn't be any better. We're with everything that's coming up with what they're doing, as well as other business happening, the legislative session, et cetera. There's so much going on, and we want people to get involved and be a part of this. It's one person at a time, and it really does matter for everyone, whoever is involved and wants to be involved. Do you have any other questions, Renee, for Dr. Wright?
Yes, okay. Just one more. What specific policies promote anti-Blackness?
Well, it depends on the institution. So at least from my experience and the experience of the research participants, there have been, so what came up in the research study a lot was policies specifically in regards to the student code of conduct. So many of the research participants talked about how there were multiple incidents where there would be policies that were either too vague or too specific that were enacted at their institution, and say they got in trouble because they supposedly somehow broke the policy, right? And they would receive some type of sanction. And they found out that sometimes their colleagues who were non-Black would break the same code or violation and receive a lesser sanction. There's actually documentation and research that talks about this, right? And one of the biggest critiques that towards functional areas such as student conduct is that, the system that we have in place within functional areas such as student conduct replicate our justice system, which we already know is problematic. So it's one of those things where I tell people, start with the student code of conduct. What policies do you think don't make sense? What policies are using inaccessible language? And what policies are implicitly targeting certain communities? And for many of the research participants, and then some prior personal experience myself, we noticed that some of the policies stem from specifically the student code of conduct, which impacted our experiences as students, especially when there was little to no evidence presented as to how the violation actually was created. And I acknowledge that the answer was slightly vague near the end, and that's only because of, again, preserving anonymity for the research participants.
Thank you. Stacy, that's all I have in the Q&A on my side, so feel free.
Well, as we close, thank you, Renee. I wanted you to share some personal information about yourself. I know you work so hard and you had such an amazing presentation. Just a little bit about yourself, where you're born and raised and what you like to do when you're not working so much, and, just where you like, what's your favorite food? I mean, just some things like that, if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, most definitely. So I am Creole, culturally speaking, so essentially Afro-Indigenous. And my family, they're from the South, specifically New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm from Las Vegas. Specifically, I was born and raised on the West Side, so West Las Vegas, the historic West Las Vegas, if you will, right? And some of my favorite foods is anything that is Southern comfort food or Creole food, right? So I love catfish. I love turkey necks, pig feet, pork chops, all that jazz, collard greens, mashed potatoes, all that jazz. And what I like to do when I'm not working, I definitely do like to read. And now that I'm done with school, because I'm not going back for any additional degrees, I'm just not, I'm tired. It's been good to read for leisure nowadays. And there's a book that I've been reading called The Transformation, and it's by Dr. James Gordon, and it's called The Transformation, and it talks about the journey and the process to wholesome and holistic healing after trauma or after traumatic experiences have happened in your life. And I really appreciate that book because one, there are some things that I've had to address myself from traumas that I have from my past, and the work that I've been doing alongside my therapist has been very helpful, and I've really appreciated it. And that book has helped me understand, like, why is this traumatic for me, and what reaction does it create for me, and then how can I overcome this instead of just so yeah, I really have enjoyed that. And then also I love playing video games. I've been playing PS4 ever since COVID hit. I love sleeping, I love napping, but I also love to cook. The only thing that I am really bad at is portion control. So I was raised in a house where anytime we cooked for large gatherings. So I don't know how to cook for myself, but I know how to cook for like 20 people. So anytime I cook, it's always an abundance. And I always try to figure out, so I'm going to drop off a plate to my mom, I'm going to drop off a plate to my sister, stuff like that. Only because I just cook in large abundance.
That's a great way to share. Yeah, that's a great way to share engaging with family and I'm from home. I love the Southern Creole, the food, the rice with the beans and all of that good food with the hot sauce. I really enjoyed your conversation, your presentation today. You're so studious and reading is, sharing your book even is wonderful. I want to just thank you so much. This is such an important space for all of us right now, and for us to have more awareness and greater engagement. All of us, if we can inspire that, and I think you have today, we will all be so much better and smarter and ready for it right now as we are marching ahead this year in a positive way. So thank you so much. And thank you, Renee, if you want to close us out. Dr. Wright, thank you once again.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
I'm going to go right along the lines of Stacy. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to present for Rebel Recharge. We couldn't thank you enough. Great information to move forward with. And everyone, thank you for joining us, and have an amazing Friday and enjoy your weekend. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Feel free to reach out to myself or to Kevin, and I will be sharing this recording by end of day.
Thank you, Kevin. Much appreciated. Thank you, Renee.
All right. Thank you so much. Y'all have a good day.
Amy,